My name is Linda Beuys. I'm the curator of this project on friendship, collateral damage, how to explain hair hunting to a dead German artist. Welcome to the 5th meeting, Footnotes to the work of Joseph Beuys, co-hosted by Duitsland Instituut Amsterdam. A special welcome to Hans Peter Riegel. Special welcome to you. A special welcome to Arie Hartog. And we're very honored that you are here today and that you are our guests. Really, we appreciate it very much. On Friendship Collateral Damage 4 centers on Joseph Beuys and the West German post-war history. Joseph Sassoon Semah takes us on a journey of critical analysis of Beuys. He has done extensive research into Joseph Beuys' work, values and ideas, and based on this research and text, he analyzes the deeper meaning of the secret symbols used by Joseph Beuys. He reacts to them using new monumental sculptures and a series of new drawings, performances and texts. With this project, we want to raise public awareness about the missing information on Joseph Beuys. Information that has been disregarded during the Beuys celebration year or has been evaded to avoid uncomfortable confrontations. It is a new project about the reading of Beuys' art by the Jewish Babylonian artist Joseph Sassoon Semah. Welcome to you as well. A little bit strange that I'm the one who says it, but welcome to you as well. We're very happy that you are here. Partners in the project is the Duitsland Instituut, of course. He's the co-host of tonight. Goethe Instituut, Amsterdam Deutsche Bank, Lumen Travel Gallery, Gerhard Marx House Bremen, Arie Hartog is the director, the Maastricht Institute of Arts, Maarten Lutherkerk, Andreas Beulen is sitting there, welcome to you as well. Berkway Advocaten, Geestelijke Gezondheidszorg Amacura en Redstone Natuursteen en Projecten. The project is realized with the support of Mondriaan Fund and Redstone Natuursteen en Projecten. Before we start this afternoon, Professor Nijhuis, director of DIA, Duitsland Instituut Amsterdam, just informed me that he cannot attend this meeting. He just checked positive for corona. I'm very pleased to let you know that Krijn Thijs, senior researcher of the German Institute, is kind enough to replace him at such a short notice. Many thanks, Krijn. Can I give you the floor? Yes? Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Linda, for the invitation. Indeed short, but I'm very happy to be your moderator today. And my main task will be to introduce the guests to you, the 3 speakers of this afternoon, and after that to keep an eye on the time plan and schedule of the program. Somewhat unpolitely, perhaps, I will not start with the outward guests joining us today, but I will start the introduction with Joseph Sassoon Semah. He might, in some regard, be the main guest of today. He is the one whose work initiated this day, and he is the one whose work currently is exhibited in the Amsterdam University at the Oudermanhuis Poort, one of the appearances of the On Friendship Collateral Damages project. Joseph Sassoon Semah was born in Baghdad in 1948 as one of the last remaining of a family line of Babylonian Jews. He is the grandson of a legendary rabbi who preached tolerance between Judaism and Islam and defines his work as heritage of that tradition. During the 1970s, when the art world was occupied with other discourses, Semah developed a visual research in which remembrance and tolerance were the central themes. The mutual connection between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam always forms the starting point of his work, without losing sight of possible problematic aspects of this connection. His work fits into the centuries-old liberal, Jewish, humanistic intellectual tradition, reaching from Baruch de Spinoza to Emmanuel Levinas, Martin Buber, Isaiah Berlin, and the Frankfurter Schule. His extensive oeuvre consists of drawings, paintings, sculptures, installations, performances, and texts. So we're very happy to hear about your work in a minute. Then I proceed to our two guests from abroad. The first I want to mention is Hans Peter Riegel, born in Düsseldorf, today living in Zurich, in Switzerland. He studied visual communications, art science, and philosophy. Riegel is a conceptual artist and curator, a filmmaker, photographer, and art director. And he probably is most well known for his biographical books, first about Jörg Immenhof, and then second about Joseph Beuys, the 4-part critical biography on Joseph Beuys, probably the standard work on Beuys today. And we will hear about it in a minute, as he will be the keynote speaker today. So very welcome again, Mr. Riegel, to be here in Amsterdam. Finally, Arie Hartog, born in Maastricht, living in Bremen. He studied art history at the Catholic University of Nijmegen, obtained his doctorate with a dissertation on the modern figurative tradition in Germany over 25 years ago. And he worked as a curator. He works since the 1990s, 1996 to be precisely, as a curator at the Gerhard Max House in Bremen. In 2009, he became the director of this museum. His research focuses on the history of sculpture in the 20th century and is author as well of many publications. So these are the three guests we have today, and I want, after my welcome, give a short outline of the program, how we built up this afternoon. We start with the keynote speech by Hans Peter Riegel on the work and the biography of Joseph Beuys. After that, we will have a short reaction of Joseph Semah with a statement and a presentation, short presentation of his own work. And we will follow up with a speech of Arie Hartog on the work of both artists. And that will deliver us with enough input and ideas to have a short round on the panel of exchange of ideas and conversation. And then I really want to warmly invite you in the audience to contribute your ideas, your reactions, and to have controversy, critical exchange of ideas. And I look forward to see how this new presentation of the biography of Beuys is leading to new ideas tonight here. This also means my request to the audience to keep your critical or supportive reactions to those things being said in the lectures today, to keep them for the discussion. At the end, we will really come back to you and give plenty opportunity to deliver your input, but at the end of the presentations, which we will have first. So that are the most things to be said by me. The last, not unimportant part is the request to put off your cell phones and iPhones and put them on silent. So we can join the presentation first of Hans Peter Riegel. Nice to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Yes, hello, and I'm very pleased to be here in Amsterdam, one of my very favorite cities in life. So I was born in Düsseldorf, as you heard, and in my youth we had many travels to Amsterdam for different reasons, you may know. So I know the place quite well, some friends here, and it's always very nice to come back. I would like to make some short remarks on what you will see next. The first point is it absolutely impossible to present the complexity of Beuys' work in such a lecture of 30 minutes. So it's definitely not possible. And the point, what I said, is activities and not work and not artist work, because Beuys himself, he understood his entire existence as a kind of an artist work, as an artist work. So all his activities has to do with this position. And he felt called up to reform humanity in a so-named social sculpture, as you may all know. But for a long time, Beuys kept quiet about this social sculpture, that the social sculpture he mentioned is exactly the same as the social organism of Rudolf Steiner. He kept that secret for a very long while. He just started officially talking about this in the early 70s. And Beuys also repressed the fact that the social sculpture was not his own invention, and he kept that to his last days. He always showed up that that is an origin in idea of himself. And that is a typical behavior of Beuys, like his public vita. The public vita, which is known, was kindly, you would say, fake today. Not all, but most of it was kind of a fake based on memories, false memories, based off stories he told, and simply said, most of them are just fiction, and some of them are really true lies. And I think we all had a different view on Beuys, and I include myself into that. And honestly, I said that in an interview a few months ago, that I was surprised about Beuys when I started the research for the book. I was deeply surprised. I had a complete different view on Beuys, like you may have too. Sorry. So just for a moment, think about your picture, your idea of Beuys. And didn't we say all that he was a left-wing revolutionary, a green, a visionary, ecologist, a pacifist at all? Didn't we think that all? Didn't we know that? Did we know that Beuys' reality was that he was a servant and a prophet of an esoteric doctrine? Did we know that? I don't think so. Did we imagine that Beuys remained attached in his past, which was started in the First and the Third Reich? And the public, even the players of the art scene, until today, don't want to listen to that, don't want to hear to that, don't want to accept the fact that Beuys was not the person they may see, they may thought about. Beuys was different in many different ways. So what I will show you now, I don't want to show you a typical kind of a lecture. I just want to show you images and quotes of Beuys he made by himself. And I want to show you the world, the mindset Beuys was in. I don't want to make too many comments on that. I just want to leave it to you to see what it was and to make your own mind about what you will see now. And as I said, it is probably a complete different picture as you personally have. So I called it a German artist. Not surprisingly, I call him a German artist because he was a core German artist. First, I will show you some images just to remind where he was coming from, in which atmosphere he grew up, and what it was. It is very worth to keep that in mind first, to see that, and to follow then the next words and the sentences and the quotes of Beuys. This is 1936 in Nuremberg. Beuys personally was there. I was wandering all through Germany with his ban, which is the Hitlerjugend ban. He walked all through Germany with his fellows to this event. He was there. Beuys was there.
So, wie Sie Ihre Arbeit auffassen, haben wir einen neuen Künstlertypus?
Ja, das ist sicher der Fall. Ich bin daran interessiert, diesen neuen Künstlertypus zu entwickeln.
Beuys said this in 1974. So imagine, 1974, it was after he disappeared from the academy, or he was thrown out of the academy to say so. You could say probably it was ironic. It could be you can read it as an ironic statement. But if you see the next statements, you may then in doubt if it was purely an ironic statement, or if he was just telling some kind of a truth about his personal mindset.
Kommt eine neue deutsche Jugend und die dressieren wir schon von ganz Kleinem an für diesen neuen Staat.
But can someone honestly say, that he felt independent and free in such an atmosphere? With the distance from 1973 to when it was. And he said things like this in front of pupils of schools. He said that in public speeches and in interviews, quotes like this. He said that in his authorized biography. This was a sentence he said. And he said it was perfect for young people to act out. Maybe, in his kind of view. Or he said that his teacher was very attractive. Okay, he wore an SA uniform, but he was an attractive teacher for him. Sorry for the typography. The typography changed. The original typography was different. So this is always PowerPoint. Sorry for that. So this is a very interesting quote. A very interesting quote. Read that carefully. He said that in 1982, to pupils in a public school, he said that their books were better than the books of my children of today. This is not ironic. This is a core statement, and that is very typical, even in the kind of suppressing what was in the past. He thought about the Jewish child in his class, in his school. But what he told was not the truth. The truth was that the kids have to leave the school in 1934, and the Kristallnacht was in 1938. So their kids have to disappear very early, and they don't went to America, they went directly to Auschwitz, which is laid down by documents. You will find the documents in the archive of Kleve. But Beuys had a complete different view, and he always said in Niederrhein it was completely, again, sorry for the typography, they didn't check that. Kleve was completely different than old Germany. This was wrong. My mother was in Kleve at this time. She said she saw this. This was in the front of Beuys' school in Kleve. This was the Hindenburg Gymnasium Beuys visited. This was Kleve's in the early 30s, when the NSDAP still made a run for the Poles. Kleve's was, and this was is a statement in a book, a historical book about Jewish community in Germany. Kleve was a core Nazi place, nothing than this. But Beuys always thought he lived in Rindern, near Kleve. He was a kid from the land side. Wrong. Beuys grew up in front of a big factory, a big margarine factory, owned by a Jew, by the way. This was the factory. Beuys lived, I can tell you, on the right side, on the right angle, exactly where the right angle is of this picture, was the house Beuys lived in. So he lived in front of this huge margarine fabric, so don't wonder why he used this material. Yes, and then he went to the war. He didn't have to go, he was too young. He goes by his own decision, and he decided to go there for 12 years. So he became a professional soldier in Hitler's army. And he said that he don't want to stand out of his other guys. So he said his decision was right. And he said that also in 1980 in an interview, as a pacifist. He was then in the Green Party. Everybody have seen him as a pacifist. And he said, okay, this decision was morally right. Was it morally right to bomb other people? I don't think so. The Tataren legend, just briefly. I said it, it's for you, Linda, it's bullshit. So I said, just the only comment on the Tataren legend when he was crashed with his airplane is just bullshit. I just leave it that way. Maybe we can talk about after that. This should be his airplane, and he always said that he was found in depth snow. I researched that in the army archives. There was no snow on Crimea at this time for months. It was very unusual, and Crimea is very in the south. There was no snow, and there has been no Tatars. The Tatars have been deported by Stalin, so bullshit. So he came then back to Kleve, his favorite hometown, his beloved hometown, and Kleve was completely destroyed, and he was very near Kleve in the woods in the fightings of the Reichswald, which is a very common battle, one of the hardest battles in the Second World War. And Beuys was exactly in the middle of it, and that was his experience of the war, not the crash on Crimea. That was his war when he came back and saw everything destroyed, and he was under shootings. Then, after the war, he then started to tell about what happened in the war. He told that he was studying while the war. He was studying at Rijksuniversiteit Posen. He never studied for a day in his whole life in a natural science university because he hadn't the permit to do so. But he said that. He always said he is a scientist. He always said that. Interesting. But the interesting point about this is that he said, okay, this is not my idea of science talking about amöbs. Where did he get it from? He didn't get it from this Rijksuniversiteit Posen. The professor was his father-in-law, Hermann Wurmbach, who was the father of Eva Beuys. Hermann Wurmbach was a core Nazi. He was a Gau, second stellvertretender Gauleiter. He was a core Nazi, and he was writing about sterilization. He was against the Jewish. He was telling sterilization. What does that mean? I missed the word in English. Sorry for that. So, and just read the last sentence. That is very interesting. And this is Hermann Wurmbach, the father-in-law. So you can say, okay, that is not Beuys' fault that his father was father-in-law was a Nazi. Say, okay, it's not his fault, but it's interesting that this relation and the sketches of the amöbs and so become went from the hand of Wurmbach and friends. Van der Grinden told me that Beuys and Wurmbach were very close with each other. They liked each other. This is also another interesting quote you will find in Lebenslauf Werklauf, which is let me say the kind of a statement of Beuys about his idea of being an art of work. His life is an art of work, and he thought about Fritz Rolf Rothenburg. This is very interesting. He made the suggestion that Fritz Rolf Rothenburg was a Jew. But Rothenburg is not the Jewish name. Rothenburg is an old German family from the eastern part of Germany. And his authors told then and made a suggestion and fulfilled the suggestion that this Rothenburg told Beuys he should read Steiner. False. It's untrue, completely untrue, because never Rothenburg in Oranienburg never died and never has been in Oranienburg. I checked the archives. So, and then he get to Steiner. He always felt that he was asked by Steiner personally to be his follower, to be his prophet, and that is a very clear statement on this, when Beuys said that he is responsible to fulfill Steiner's work, and he saw himself as the core follower of Steiner and the prophet of Steiner. And that is the moment when you must see that Beuys underlined his complete existence and his complete work with these anthroposophical ideas and this anthroposophical chain. And then he tried to propose that to other people. He tried to do that. He tried to propose that to his class in the academy. He tried to propose that to his friends, but he failed in many different ways. But he said then that this situation is like Auschwitz. It's not allowed to say so. It's not allowed to propose Steiner's ideas. And then he combined this and said it's like Auschwitz, where the mindset of the people is then terminated, and the creativity and everything is terminated by the society, by the actual society, which is completely, completely his personal view, when he said this society is much worse than the Third Reich, and Hitler threw the bodies into the ovens, only throw the bodies into the ovens. This has very much to do with Steiner's ideas of reincarnation, and so it's very complicated to describe this, but this has very much to do with that he said the Jews, they go into the ovens to help the human beings to survive and to get into a better situation, and the thanks for the Jews is a good karma in the next reincarnation. Simply said so. Sorry to say it that simple. He said that to his students in 1967. And later he said that the people are short-sighted when they all think Beuys is working about the KZ. And then he tried to underline that he's working with Feld has nothing to do with this view on Auschwitz and the KZ situation, but it's more an opening to a spiritual world. And this is his center work about the Holocaust, the so-named Auschwitz demonstration. This is the only work about huge oeuvre, which is clearly dedicated to this. There was he made a sketch for in 1958 for a Denkmal, for a monument, for Auschwitz monument, but he failed with it. But this is in his core work. This is the only thing. Just think about this. Just have a look on this, and this is what he said about Auschwitz. And just read the words. And just read the last sentence. This was his position in regarding the Auschwitz, the Holocaust theme. Interesting footnote: when Beuys was in Posen, next to his houses where he worked in, was one of the first concentration camps ever, and he must have seen that. It was not over. You can't oversee it if you have been there. This is a very short was a very short film. It's a very short film about his class in the academy. What Beuys did there was the same what he did in the Celtic performance. He washed the feet of his students, and Why do I show this? He did a lot of actions, and he said, to be a teacher is my greatest work of art. This is also stolen from Steiner. Steiner said nearly the same. To educate kids, to educate younger people is the biggest work we have to do. So it's nearly the same. But the interesting is that when he did this at the academy, he had many young followers, the so-named Beuys-Jüngers, and of course he was an excellent teacher. I was assistant of Jörg Immendorf. Jörg Immendorf was one of his favorites, and Jörg told me a lot about how good he was as a teacher. He was undoubtful. He was really a great teacher, and the whole generation of artists has to thank him for that. But on the other hand, it was very known at the academy that he created some kind of a German cult. And some people didn't like this behavior of Beuys. And that was Professor Manfred Sieler. He made a protest flyer against these actions Beuys did in the academy. And it was not the only one. At the end of the so-named Akademiestreit, he had many other artists and professors against him, with not saying Beuys is wrong by teaching. They said Beuys is wrong by behavior. His personal behavior is not in a way to say it's liberal, it's open. It was completely the opposite. And I have documents, and if you would see the documentary of part of my books, my 4 books, just want to give you an idea. There are many documents I have in this book written by people in the background and of the government, and they know that it's about this complicated situation and try to help him out, try to do something. They haven't been against him. They tried to help the situation, but Beuys destroyed the whole thing with his aggressive and unkind kind of discussion he made with his other professors and with the government. So and then he went out of the academy. He was thrown out of the academy, and then he met a guy called Karl Fastabend. Karl Fastabend was a core Nazi. He was an SA man. He was later. He is in SS uniform. He had a higher rank in the SS, and Fastabend was his private secretary. He was his private secretary, and Fastabend wrote all the political statements Beuys has given in the early 70s, and Fastabend was also together with him in the so-named AUD, Aktion Unabhängige Deutschland, which was a core right-wing party. And Beuys candidated for this party. And it's interesting to see this is a part of the poll flyer. And if you see there is Fastabend with him. So you can't say Fastabend was just a random figure. Fastabend was writing all his political statements. So why is Beuys asking a former SA man and a former SA man to write his political statements? And if you read these political statements, they are clearly right-wing. You can compare it, I did that in the book, and compare it with the right-wing parties of today, of their wordings, exactly the same. In every second sentence, you read the word Volk. It's always there. So it's completely right-wing. And Beuys invited people like Hans-Georg Haverbeck. Haverbeck was also a high-ranking Nazi. His wife is just thrown into jail, 93 years old, because she denied Holocaust. And this people been surrounding Beuys for many years. Very interesting piece. Deutsche Bank is sponsor of this event. I'm so sorry to do that. Not sponsoring, but partner. Okay, I'm so sorry about that. But Beuys, the left side is a piece he did together with Klaus Steck. It was a poster, and letzte Warnung an Deutsche Bank, beim nächsten Mal werden Namen und Begriffe genannt. He said names and Begriffe and what is Begriffe in English? Terms, exactly. Terms. And the point was, names and terms is a anthroposophical speech. The anthroposophical people always speak about terms. They always say, we have the terms. We only have the terms. So if you have knowledge about the anthroposophical side, you would understand this poster differently. Interesting-wise, Beuys was friend with Hermann Joseph Abs, the old man on the right photograph. Hermann Joseph Abs was in the board of Auschwitz, what was it, IG Farben. He was in the board of IG Farben, and after the war, many people said that he was one of the Auschwitz founders, Hermann Joseph Abs. But you couldn't say so because Hermann Joseph Abs was the chairman of Deutsche Bank for many, many years. Interesting footnote by this, Abs was a relative of Beuys, wife, Eva, because Eva's sister was married to Hermann Joseph Abs' son. So this was this very interesting connection. And all the organizations Beuys founded had their account at Deutsche Bank. And he always said about Deutsche Studentenpartei, Deutsche Bank. Why? Why is that? Because imagine, it was in the late 70s when everything was left-wing. He was in the Green Party and doesn't have his account at the anthroposophical bank like GLS. No, he has the account at Deutsche Bank. Interesting. And this is Beuys' sponsor, Karl Ströer, and that should interest you from the Amsterdam and from Dutch standpoint, because Ströer was the owner of Wella, the hairdressing staff, and his former partner was a man named Krohn, and he was from Amsterdam, and he was inventing the technology Ströer later used, and Ströer asked the NS regime, the NS authorities in Netherlands, to take over his patents and his besitz, and to take this over. And I worked on a story for the Spiegel on this, and we made a big research on that and approved all this. So Ströer was the sponsor of Beuys. I say really the sponsor because he paid Beuys' bill over the years. He was not only founding Block Beuys in Darmstadt, he was founding him personally. He sent him money each month. This is very interesting. So Beuys was not only an art collector or so. He was the financier of Beuys. A very strange man, and even this is a very interesting situation. Rudi Dutschke, at the last years, Beuys tried to get in touch with Rudi Dutschke. May you know Rudi Dutschke, the famous German student revolutionary. And the interesting point is the right wing, this is a right-wing magazine, always tried to catch both of them. And they made statements for this right-wing magazine. Why did they do that? And interesting-wise, Rudi Dutschke at the end of his years had contacts with these people at Floto of Hans-Georg Haverbeck. He went to meetings with them, and he tried to find a new kind of family, and he wrote in his notes very much of being Deutsch and being German and becoming German. That was very interesting, the shift of Rudi Dutschke at his last years, very interesting aspect. But Gretchen Dutschke wrote in her personal notes that Milan was a friend of Beuys and Dutschke and tried to catch Rudi for the Achberg Circle. The Achberg Circle are hardcore anthroposophs, and Beuys was very close with them. Beuys went always to Achberg, and to him it smelled too much like blood and soil. And the Gollwitzer was a very famous man. He was an anti-Nazi and is a very famous man in Germany. He was a priest, Evangelion priest. So this is then what Beuys, what Steiner said. The German soul must be entrusted with the world mission. So that Steiner said the Germans have the responsibility to save the world, because the Germans were developing the world. It was completely the idea of Steiner that the Germans are responsible for the future of the world. The Germans are the only folk which is capable to do so. And in another sentence, Steiner once wrote, the white race is the only race to survive. This is what Beuys said to that. It's exactly the same with other words. So that was, Beuys was deeply together with Steiner in these meanings, and this was out of his last speech, a few months before his death. So this is a statement. If you're just facing your death, and he knows at this time that he should die, if you face your death and to make such statements, and if you would read the whole speech, it's a complete statement of being German, that the German has this capacity. It's very strange. It's a very strange statement of Beuys, but it's completely how he thought about his position in the world and of the things he has to do. And honestly, and I was very shocked when I saw all this information, when I saw all these pictures. I knew Beuys personally, quite well. I had a complete different view. But I found these pictures in the archives of Meuland. Beuys has given all his shit and all his garbage to the Van Grinten brothers, and they didn't check that. But they left me check it. And I found pictures like this when Beuys was together with his Nazi friends, Stuka friends, whatever you want to say to him. And this is a very strange picture I found. I don't know where it is, I don't know who it is, but this is a complete different image of Beuys, of his surroundings, of his behavior. And this is the point I want to make today. Maybe you get a different impression of him, not in depth, just, and honestly, I'm very honest to say, it's maybe provocative for some people, but all what I said and all what I showed is researched. It's based on documents. It's not thesis, it's fact. I should have checked this. So. But this is a piece of art. Cool. Just a brief remark on Joseph Semah, because I had conversations with him over the last months via email and via calls about his work on Beuys. And for me, it was enriching, very enriching to see that and to listen to him and to read his words. And he started with an action 1 year after Beuys' death, and he then turned the picture around about the dead hare, which was a canicle, what to say, in truth. And maybe you will hear about this later, and maybe you know about this later, but I just want to make this remark. Joseph's work is such a rich founding of new ideas about Beuys, a new view on Beuys, like this, when Joseph destroyed the files, the files reminding of Beuys in his way. I have other conclusions on this picture, but I totally agree that it's a false reminding, and it's a false story, a covering story about what really happened in this time and what was really happening in Beuys' youth. This is part of the famous Straßenbahnhaltestelle which he displayed in Venice in 1976. This is the original place where it was, and that was close to his uncle's factory. And of course, we just had this discussion yesterday about the oak and the stone. I have complete different informations on that, but it's very interesting to listen to what Joseph has to say on this. But the interesting point is these symbols Beuys use are so German, and they are so deeply connected to German history, to German behavior, that it's worth to see it from the eyes of a Jew what is to say about this. And this is my last remark. One of the major performances of Beuys was Eurasia. Eurasia was a big theme for Beuys all over. And Eurasia was also a big theme for Steiner and is a big theme for the right-wing politicians and for the right-wing parties and people all over Europe, probably all over the world. It's a central idea. And now it's a central idea. It's very, very actual. It's a central idea of Putin. This is what Putin has in mind, founding Eurasia. There are lots of quotes from Putin known about this Eurasia, and he just said that his strategy is to found a new Eurasia. So just remind this if you think about Beuys, where things like this could lead through. Thank you very much.
So I have a very short statement. I will read it out of my paper. We only know that there is no escape from language, yet which all of us can trace to its source. But also, without a doubt, the existence of the guest, emphasized particularly when he is in close proximity to the impulse of Joseph Beuys to represent himself as a post-war victim/hero, as an artist, and finally as a certain redeemer and healer. As a consequence, and between Galut and the Western territory, there now emerges the guest's recollection of the original misunderstanding. The misunderstanding between Judaism and Christianity concerning the representing of Christ element, between brackets, among others, in the teaching of Rudolf Steiner about Ahiram and Lucifer. To begin with, if the act of baptism itself is a mystery, and if Christians are always already baptized, then every baptized Christian is a priest. I quote Martin Luther. In the New Testament, the Holy Spirit carefully avoids giving the same sacrados, priest, to any of the apostles or to any other office. Rather, he accepts this name to the baptized or Christians as their birthright and hereditary name. None of us is born an apostle, preacher, teacher, pastor, but all of us are born solely priests. End quote. I quote Novalis. Every human being should be an artist. Everything can become beautiful art. I will try it in German. Jeder Mensch sollte Künstler sein. Alles kann zur schöne Kunst werden. But the true poet has always remained a priest, just as the true priest has always remained a poet. And ought not the future bring the old state affairs back again? That representative of the genius of humanity could easily be the poet par excellence. End quote. I quote Martin Tseftavier, Poem of the End. Ghetto of the chosen, the wall and ditch, no mercy. In this most Christian of worlds, all poets are Jews. End quote. And in effect, Joseph Beuys' dictum, jeder Mensch ist eine Künstler, is a function of a certain post-war, pre-designed faith. The logical consequence of Rudolf Steiner's belief that his own exclusive scientific faith is the product of a certain conflict with the guest. As will be clear already, the distinction between Rudolf Steiner / Joseph Beuys is that the original misunderstanding between Judaism and Christianity is always already one-sided. In any case, it is Rudolf Steiner, as well as Joseph Beuys, invisible glory admitted. Insofar then that the newly designed faith must emerge from death, from war, and from extermination. Taken at once to its wholly transcendental narrative, which is always already the rejection of the guest. I quote Rudolf Steiner, "Jewry, as such, has outlived itself for a long time. It does not have the right to exist in the modern life of nations. That it has survived, nevertheless, is a mistake by world history, of which the consequences were bound to come," end quote. Hereafter, each and every object, i.e., each and every artwork on display, lies in a certain narrative. There is no other way. And this has been the German language, in other words, the creative source of Joseph Beuys. His plan behind the idea of social sculpture, or, if you wish, the extended concept of art. I quote, that's what Beuys said in 1985, "Reden über das eigene Land, Deutschland," talking about one's own country, Germany. As strange as this might seem, my path has been traced by language. It did not spring from what one calls an artistic gift, end quote. And Joseph Beuys, the ex-Third Reich volunteer soldier, who reformed himself deliberately by altering, so to see, his wartime court dress into a fisherman jacket, continues to assume and without question the role of the nation's symbolic victim/hero. Then, in the heat of the moment, Joseph Beuys erased his own memory to hide himself in the abstract of the German language, of what shall or shall not be acknowledged by him to be the veiled memory of the kingdom of the Third Reich. Undoubtedly, and in this context, the guest's voice, namely the Hebrew language, Ivrit, is significant, for it is a transitional step in the long process of telling who is the authentic victim, and who is the victimizer. Finally, and once again, we must emphasize that the object, namely the artworks, and the transcendental implication of Joseph Beuys' post-war ideology became the forms of a certain paranoia. Or, on a different level, the circumcised heart of Joseph Beuys, abrupt transformation from a victimizer to a symbolic post-war West German victim/hero, is nothing else but a political play. It is as though in post-war West Germany, Joseph Beuys became dynamic, complex of double victimizers. The mission, as it were, of a post-war politician/artist to veil the mirror image of a German citizen who volunteered to fight for the Third Reich. This argument, however, is no more than a statement that the certified victimizer named Joseph Beuys has never been properly, between brackets, dead. Thank you.
So Hans Peter Riegel said 30 minutes for Joseph Beuys is difficult. I was asked to tell something about Joseph Beuys and Joseph Semah in 15 minutes. So look forward. Let me have a look. Thank you, Linda and Duitsland Institute for inviting me to this meeting. And in this short paper, And in this short paper, I will give an art historian's point of view. I will give an art historian's point of view on how Joseph Sassoon Semah refers to the work of his famous predecessor, Joseph Beuys. But it seems important to state at the very beginning that Semah criticizing Beuys is nothing but a detail within his much broader critique on the way Western art functions. And over the last few years, we have seen the incorporation of non-Western perspectives into art historical narratives, but this, I must say, has only touched the surface. Semah started with this in the late 1970s, a point Dutch art history consequently negates. But let us start with the other Joseph. Here you see Beuys' famous last installation, Blitzschlag mit Lichtschlag auf Hirsch, oder Lichtschein, lightning with stag in its glare. And when you see the cast in Frankfurt, London, or Bilbao, it reads that this work, quote, articulates the German artist's obsession with primal and elemental forces. And art historical literature will give you loads of hints on its possible meaning. Interpretations of interpretations of interpretations of interpretations. And in 2013, the German artist Volker Merz presented a much more obvious interpretation. That was, by the way, in the same year when the first edition of Hans Peter Riegel's biography was published. Volker Merz was invited for an exhibition in Tel Aviv in 2011, and he was asked to do something with this fantastic German artist, Joseph Beuys. And Merz asked, fantastic German artist? What is that? And he made this series, Every Soldier is an Artist, and part of it is 2 small ceramics where he linked the installation to Beuys' history as a soldier of the German Air Force in World War II, and the military decoration that Beuys had received. And seeing that visual parallel, you cannot but wonder why nobody saw that before. For a German Stuka crew, lightning is death from above. Visual triggers can be much stronger than textual. And over the last few years, Beuys has partly been deconstructed, but he's still commonly seen as a genius artist. And in a, I think, fantastic political move, he was sanctified in 2021 when some 20 German museums showed exhibitions commemorating the centenary of the artist's birth. To cut a long story short, in my personal interpretation, Beuys was a German esoteric artist who, after reading James Joyce, transposed the poetic concept that the stream of consciousness becomes literature. He took and transposed that concept into visual art. So everything he did and touched could become art. From this follows a meandering output of mostly visual ideas and puns, full of esoteric references, and while their actual content was not clear, after all, it's an unedited stream, it was obviously anti-modernist and intended to be spiritual. And that served the good old tradition that there is a genuine German romantic approach to art. And it met the economic situation of the Bundesrepublik in the late 1960s, where people were actually willing to pay enormous amounts of money for esoteric art with nationalist implications. Ströer was mentioned before. Now to the other Joseph. Joseph Semah turned up in Berlin art circles in the late 1970s. He is a Baghdad-born Israeli who from the very beginning positioned himself as an outsider. That's the guest that was in his own lecture. After moving to Amsterdam in 1981, he became a part of the local scene. And on first sight, and that is what you sometimes read in reviews, Semah's work seems to be meandering, as that of the other Joseph. But his method is almost the extreme opposite. His work is circling around defined themes, doing in-depth research, often on the work of famous artists of the Western canon, showing that these works can be read against the grain of common interpretation and thereby demonstrating the structural blindness of Western art history or even Western culture to Jewish visual traditions that cannot be denied, and implying that modern Western art, and most of all the system surrounding it, is complicit to the physical erasure of Jews in European history. But Semah does not come from the position of long-gone bourgeois European Jewry and its intellectual tradition, but literally from far away. From the very beginning, he stated that he tried to understand art via the language of his Baghdad grandfather, and changing his name from just Joseph Semah to Joseph Sassoon, Semah stresses this point. I understand his work as a double rereading. As a rereading and research into his own historical sources and language, combined with a rereading and reinterpretation of modern art. And he does this, first of all, by visual art. The work you see here, an introduction to the principle of relative expression, an overpainted Talmud Bavli, stands for this principle. And when Semah uses the word footnote, like in the title of this small meeting, it does not mean proof, nor reference, but autonomous interpretation that adds to the text. So the black ink is a layer, reminding us that there is something underneath, something hidden, nonetheless present. In 2004, Museum van Bommel van Dam in Venlo showed the exhibition Boys für Kinder, Boys for Children, that had been developed by Schloss Meuland, Kunstmuseum Bonn and the Lehmbruck Museum in Duisburg. It was a clear symptom of the deep crisis that haunts the museum world. On the one hand, art is being presented as something mystical, spiritual and deep, that only the few of the initiated can understand. And on the other hand, this must be made easy to digest for the simple-minded. The parallel to Christian religious education is striking, but that's another topic. The Dutch Museum invited Joseph Semah to do a parallel exhibition, A Journey to Paradise. The working title had been Boys for Grandparents, because the starting thesis was that European grandparents living before 1939 had at least some minimal visual knowledge of Jewish culture, as did Joseph Beuys. Here you see a work by Beuys on the wall and two works, the famous half cross and one of Semah's double tefillin. The most striking thing about this project, I think, was that the German side neglected it completely. Meuland, the self-proclaimed center of research into Beuys, was approached but never answered. Not even the semi-tolerant, "Oh, that's an interesting interpretation," was heard. Already in the 1980s, that's an image we already saw, Semah pointed to 5 iconographical aspects in Beuys' works that have meaning from his point of view. And this book that was made for the exhibition in Venlo is a good starting point. You can find it on Joseph's website. The first and most effective is the hair. The second, the lemon. Third, fat. We heard about that already. Fourth, felt. And fifth, the tefillin. And Joseph showed convincingly that these aspects can be read and understood from a Jewish perspective and cumulate in the question, where are the Jews? One example. In Beuys' work and interpretation, the hair is mostly linked to Germanic fertility, and he himself gave this interpretation in interviews. But what is so intriguing is that while Beuys incorporated living animals into his performances, the hair is always dead. Oh well. Then it must symbolize resurrection, would be the path of standard exegesis, leading up to a highly individual iconography with anthroposophical layers. As a symbol, the hair can be tracked back to antiquity, and over the years, Beuys has added layer by layer by layer by layer by layer. But there is one layer missing, and that is the hair as a symbol of the Jew. And everybody who has ever seen an exhibition of Joseph Semah on Joseph Beuys knows that, and who's talked to him also. And the very moment you talked to Joseph, you cannot see a hair in Joseph Beuys' work anymore without thinking of this other story. In diverse works titled Jak Nijhuis from the early 1980s, Semah presented an alternative reading of Beuys' use of hairs. Jak Nijhuis is a Talmudic contraction that lays down the order of certain religious procedures when Passover and Sabbath are celebrated on the same day. And for German-speaking Jews, it may have sounded, or that is what we think nowadays, it sounded like Jak den Haas, so hunt the hare. And we know that its illustration was a visual gag for German-speaking Jews. So it turns up in German Jewish manuscripts of the Middle Ages. But that changed dramatically in the 16th century when the hunting of Jews became a threat. Here you see two images from 1514, both depicting a hare hunt, but it's only fun for the Christian on the right. Here, on the other side, the main objects are the Jews, the two hares who escape. The funny thing is also that in that image, the hares escape the net. And this points towards two conclusions. First, the possibility, and from a Jewish perspective, and I think from a cultural historian's and art historian's perspective also, the absolute need for subversive reading. So such rereading challenges established modes of interpretation by making the hare the main topic instead of the huntsman. So then the standard Beuys interpretation would probably refer to the fact that it cannot be proven that Beuys knew that the hare is a symbol for Jews. Point taken. But second conclusion, why then is every interpretation of the hare thinkable within Beuys' universe, but not the Jewish one? Does not that show that not only were Jews killed, but were even symbolically erased? Semah points to a void in knowledge and understanding. And I think he's very friendly and just invites us to increase our learning. But back to Beuys. Accompanying the centenary was the publication of a big handbook that even makes a philosopher out of this artist. The next step in sanctification. This book is very intriguing of what it discusses and what not. And yes, there are almost no Jews in that book. Loads of pain, lots of suffering, a little Auschwitz, but no Jews. Which was, by the way, the common German reaction following knowledge of atrocities, and in the work and in the interpretation of the work of Joseph Beuys, this tradition has been perpetuated. So the critique is not just pointed towards the German esoteric artist, but to an arts industry that has made him one of the biggest of all. Semah's work makes you think about the mechanisms and most of all about the ease, the only existing, radically other perspective was removed from European culture. An artist with Jewish roots living in Amsterdam explores contemporary art and finds clues in an erased European tradition first and then in the lost culture of his grandfather. Modernist art is based on principles of exclusion, and Semah was, I think, one of the first artists within the Dutch context of the early 1980s to criticize these mechanisms. He asked the simple question how modernism looks from a Jewish perspective. And by this operation, he not only unearthed unknown layers within modern art, I showed some aspects, but he also called attention to destroyed knowledge from Europe and Baghdad. And that is, I think, a fantastic dialectic move. Because by this, cultures that are lost, that have been destroyed, they survive in exile, in art, even in the art of European artists when you read them from such a Jewish perspective. Tradition is fragmented, but does not lose its meaning. Thus, modern art, even that of the German esoteric liar Joseph Beuys, can become a place of exile. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you so much. The three of you left us with a lot of input and a lot of ideas, a lot of thought-provoking images of the work of Beuys, the work of Semah, and we have a long list of issues to discuss. Probably not so much time as we would like to have. We have an audience full of people inspired and thought-provoked by the lectures you gave. I want to start the discussion here on the panel with mainly two questions, one for Joseph and one for Hans Peter Riegel, about Beuys. And that's only my personal, as an historian, my personal impressions of the undertakings you presented here. Apparently, both of you has been busy with quite an Auseinandersetzung, we would say in Germany, with Beuys. One of you as an artist, Joseph, as an artist himself, adding footnotes and interpretations, adding them as an artist to the work of Beuys, critically. And also with some anger when I understand your work right, on the way Beuys is working with his identity as a German and with his imaginary as a German artist working on also his personal past in the 20th century. Very in the direction of the project, very comparable to the lecture we had from Hans Peter Riegel, not so much as an artist, I guess, but more closely to an historian, with text and documents and quotes, with Beuys talking about himself. Both of you, in some kind, are busy with debunking the main, perhaps dominating image of Beuys as one of the most important artists in the 20th century, most important in Germany, probably even beyond. My question would be, what is the familiarity about the projects you undertook as an artist, adding to the images of Beuys, culminating in the question, who is he, who is the victim, who is the hero? I heard you ask, you didn't say so, but I heard your question is, who is Beuys? And in your case, actually the same. Beuys apparently lying about his biography, or in his own imagination, working on a Gesamtkunstwerk. Who is Beuys? Why did he do so? And where is your anger as a documentalist coming from with Beuys, working creatively, working on his biography? I would say first to Joseph perhaps, and then to Hans Peter Riegel, the familiarity in your accounts. So who is Beuys for an artist and for a writer? Give it a try.
First of all,
don't forget the microphone.
First of all, I'm not angry. I've never been angry. I mean, I do not understand. Where do you? How did you feel that I was angry? I only gave information.
Yeah.
In a different way.
Okay.
You see, what fascinated me by Hans Peter, which he is also an artist. I mean, he is not really an art historian in this sense. Yeah. He never discussed the artwork of Joseph Beuys. I mean, this question I would like to present to him. Yeah. We already discussed it last night. My task was to what also Arie mentioned. I'm not really busy with Joseph Beuys. I'm busy with the history of Western art and philosophy, post-war, Second War in Europe. So he's part of my discussion with this museums firm. So actually what I did from the start, I read the artwork of Joseph Beuys and his words in Hebrew. Mm. And when you read in Hebrew the monography of the hair, it has a completely different information. I'm afraid I'm not using the word interpretation. Huh? Mm. I'm only discussing on the level of information exactly what Hans Peter is doing. Mm. Now, when I'm telling to Hans Peter, because he referred to Joseph Beuys, a German artist, which is a very, very clever way to understand what Joseph Beuys did. Everybody knows every illuminated book because he showed the drawing of an Eichenbaum, the oak tree, and a stone. So, in the Bible, and this is 2,500 years before the appearance of Joseph Beuys, in the book Joshua, chapter 25, Joshua, some days before he died. It's also very interesting on the level of Joseph Beuys in 1982. He decided to have a new covenant with the Jews, not in Jerusalem, but in Shechem. It is very, very, very short story. Each one of us can read it. It's about 10 sentences. Next to the oak tree, he planted a big stone. In every illuminated book, also illuminated book of Martin Luther, you see this beautiful image, an oak tree, and next to the oak tree, a stone. Sometimes Joseph Beuys referred to his action is also to clean the memory of the war in Aachen, which in
Kleve.
No, Germany? In Kassel.
Kassel, yes.
Because Kassel was also bombarded by the Allies because of a different reason, because it was really a center of production of ammunition, tanks, and panzer. Okay, I will stop here because this is the way that we
adding information, information to the Beuys image,
which art history took away.
Yeah,
because of their reasons.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay.
Yeah, if you would say anger, if we say anger, I will be honest. It was a kind of anger which throws me that way and leads me that way, because I knew him personally, and when you met him, he was a very kind person. He was very lovely, very huge humor, and I was so shocked when I made the first researches and recognized how close Beuys was together with his old Nazi surroundings, how close he was involved into these thinkings and meanings, and how he used it in his own words. That's why I used his own words to describe this. And that was really a shock, and for me, because I had a complete different view on him. That was the first aspect. The second aspect was that when I was together with Immendorf, and I was for many years working with him, Immendorf always told me that about the Steiner situation, about the right-wing aspects of Beuys, and I always didn't get it, what it was. I didn't get it. And after years of researching on it, I really understood how deeply Beuys was connected to Steiner. It was not only interpreting Steiner or only interpreting anthroposophical ideas. It was really that Beuys felt himself as the dedicated follower of Steiner, and that was surprising me that much. And at least, and this is my third answer, at least the core problem until today is that the art scene and a huge part of the art scene don't want to see it, because the works of Beuys are in museums, they are described in museums, they are sheltered there and conserved there with a huge amount of money. And if you would take Beuys seriously and you would ask all this question about his esoteric chain, about his political change, if you would ask all these questions, then many of these things are in doubt, and probably some of the museums would decide to take it out or take it in a different way. Yeah. And that is the problem with the Beuys recognition at the moment and at the years. It's still a huge problem for the science too.
Yeah. Let me add on that point. So again, to the anger, I hear this as a kind of personal anger, in the sense of personal betrayal, even. Yeah. Like there came new aspects of his biography which to you were very surprising and also offending or irritating. On the other hand, me being a historian, adding some of the historical context, the title of your talk or of your presentation on Beuys is a German artist, with or without a question mark, a German artist. The main qualification is Germany. From my point of view, just a little bit of relativization, how you say, to give a bit of the context. I think what I hear of the biography of Beuys in itself is perhaps even pretty normal in the Federal Republic in Western Germany. For his generation, being born in 1921, yeah, being in the Hitlerjugend, being on the Reichsparteitag, being on the Ostfront or somewhere in the Luftwaffe, and having your main experience in 1945, well, that goes up for a whole bunch of people. Yeah. So, and even the flirt with Steiner or the transformation to being a Democrat, or the limited transformation of being a Democrat rooted in German language and concepts, also the limits of this process, we see that everywhere in western part of Germany. So is Beuys really a special case, or is the irritation rather on his mystification to a kind of holy figure of the art scene, eine Erlösende? So what is the special part of revealing all these aspects and images where in so many German families are stories like this?
You touched the point, exactly. It's not the problem. It was in my family too, my grandfather, and so that it's common. That's not the problem. The problem was that Beuys turned himself, and that is what Joseph pointed out, Beuys turned himself from a victimizer to a victim. And this is one of these huge problems. And then the art scene and all the authors and art scientists took over this image and to describe Beuys as the good one. as the one who take over all this
Guilt.
All this guilt, this German guilt. He take over this on his person. He was the Schmerzensmann of this, and this is completely wrong. This is false, and that is what I want to point out. That this is a false, a fake existence Beuys created, and you should recognize that is a fake existence, but nobody wants to listen to that.
I'm sure there are people in the audience who want to react on that point, but I did see you raising your hand for, or was I wrong to add on this discussion?
No, but it's an important point that what historians have already described as being rather normal, that within especially the whole kind of group around Beuys, it's still not common to see it that way. The fact that somebody who is going into a Stuka is killing people. But the interesting thing is that people then make a pacifist out of him from looking at the art and reading the strange stories he tells. Well, that's very strange, and it's very strange when you think of how critical this scholarly discipline always says it is.
Beuys said, just a short remark, Beuys never, and in not one sentence says he was guilty.
No.
Not in one sentence. And that is this turning from the victimizer to victim.
So this is
described the same as a victim.
And it goes one step further, and I think there comes the point about the last lecture. And that's also the problem that we are now speaking in English. The American interpretation of that last lecture goes complete in the wrong direction because they have translated Volk into people.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah.
So they think, oh, it has something to do with French Revolution. Yeah. No, it has nothing to do. When you look at, especially the way he's using words like the German language, a German form of spirit, and Volk,
Boden
also
very important.
The way he uses those terms, you get a very foul kind of taste in your mouth.
Hard to translate. Well, this...
I only want to
comment. Go ahead.
mention one
Use your microphone, please.
Here. The action which I did on my birthday, 24 of February 1986, it was about 3 weeks after the death of Joseph Beuys. And there where I've exchanged how to explain hair hunting to a dead German artist, and I was reading for him via earphone the chapter of Yakne Haz in the Talmud Bavli. And in fact, what I explained at the same time, I confess at that time, I realized that Joseph Beuys never mentioned his guilt in the war. I've confessed, it was in the art center here in Amsterdam, Arti Mechati. I understood later that nobody understood what I was saying because I was talking about my war, the 6 days war and Yom Kippur war. I've asked to forgive me as a soldier of over my deeds. And I have transformed the whole ideology that has been explained by Joseph Beuys, an art historian, that what the hair was for them. I have really manifested the hair as the crucified Jew. So it's the dead Jew. That's why also Joseph Beuys apparently talked to the hair in a very strange language. So I came to the conclusion that he tries to talk in Hebrew to the hair and to explain him about the painting which he made with the blood of the hair concerning the story of Christ element.
Okay. No, I'm sorry. I promised to the people who come over here to have opportunity to add to our thoughts and ideas. So I really want to ask to the audience, raise a hand if you want to have a commentary. I come down with the microphone, and please be short and ask. Identify the people you address your question to. I keep the mic. I'm sorry.
Hello. Hi, I'm Mia Lerm-Hayes. I'm professor of modern and contemporary art history here at the University of Amsterdam. I did my PhD about Beuys, and until very recently, I was director of a research school called Amsterdam School for Heritage, Memory and Material Culture, which researches, for example, the Holocaust and gulags and so on. This topic is of course, really one that goes to the heart of many of the things that we're grappling with. And I mean, I studied history also because I had been to Israel and wanted to understand how to prevent dehumanization and murder to reoccur. Mm-hmm. And then I did my PhD about Beuys. I read your work in 2014, Riegel, with great interest. And I think one does need to do historical research on people like Beuys. And the question really that comes out of this is the fact that somebody like Beuys haunts an artist like Joseph Semah and me. And of course, there is a whole new generation. I'm not the youngest in the world. The allegation that there is just one Beuys research or something like that, one position that fails to address and neglects and doesn't have the information and so on, that is not quite right. So I'm pleading here for some differentiation. There are also inaccuracies and so on. I wonder really what it is that this event here in the arrangement of speakers and so on, without other voices really, what does it attempt to make us feel like? We all want to feel very enlightened, as if we had the one truth and so on, and there is much talk here about a certain one truth. There's one Steiner, there's a truth to be uncovered and so on, but how do we actually deal with an artist who was personally flawed? We are probably all flawed. I'm thinking about a Russian young man at the moment who might be forced to fight in Ukraine, who might become an artist and who wants to reform education, who wants maybe to do some social reform towards a peaceful future of not a Eurasian empire. But how do we deal with a flawed artist when we try to avoid the black and white thinking that does seem to be...
Thank you so much. That is a clear question. I will try to bring this to a clear question. What are we trying to do here? What are we trying to reach in a kind of session to Beuys? Seemingly, when I understand you right, agree on a very critical view on Beuys and making, avoiding the ambivalence of a human biography. Aren't we too clear in our pictures of resettling this biography? I think it would be a first question for Riegel, but I'm also eager for Hans Peter Riegel, but I would also be eager to hear what the others say.
The answer is quite simple. If you want to understand what Beuys did, if you want to understand his work and his life, and which is the same, you have to know the layer, the things under the layer. And the point is that mostly everything is over the layer. Everything is just interpreted wrong. If you read the books about Beuys, it's mostly interpreted wrong. And the work is to give another view on Beuys. Sorry for that.
Do you want to add to that?
I've tried many times.
Your microphone?
I've tried many times to converse with this professor. She never wanted to listen or concerning my information. I'm not a fraud. She also mentioned each one of us is fraud. I'm not a fraud, and I'm not haunted by Joseph Beuys. I was just trying what...
It's a misunderstanding on flawed. So we're not
Flawed.
ambivalent persons.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So there's not talking about fraud. But the question on one truth.
I retrieve my sentence, but
yeah.
She actually never wanted to reach the information which she doesn't want to hear.
Yeah, okay, we have that conversation here and now. So the question, of course, is important. Aren't we making this one truth idea of deeper layers too important to come to a kind of one truth to Beuys? Isn't he a very ambivalent figure with many faces? And
seriously, the point is, of course, Beuys is an ambivalent...
Microphone?
Beuys is an ambivalent figure, as many artists are ambivalent. That is no surprising. But the point is, if you raise Beuys on this position like he is today in the art world, you have to ask questions. Yeah. And it was not allowed to ask questions in the past. Yeah. And so we have to ask this question.
So then in this kind of thinking, we're only at the beginning at understanding Beuys or talking about his work. Thank you. So that was the first round. There might be other people. Please raise clear hands so I can walk towards you.
It's time to get up.
So here's one. Go ahead.
Hello, Benjamin Hirschfeld, also a historian. I was interested in the statement that Beuys created his own persona, and of course we saw a lot of evidence of that. But I'm interested in kind of in the ways how he did it and when he did it, because you also showed a lot of evidence that he conversed with a lot of people who were openly right-wing or esoteric and so on. And also in his statements towards pupils, he was quite clear, I guess, if he said during his time in the Hitler Youth, he felt free. I could imagine that talking to students, just talking to pupils, he actually believed that he was free in a sense. And so he was very honest in this sense. Yeah. But did this change when he was talking to, let's say, to people from the media, to people in the art world? Did he have like several different audiences in this sense? So that was actually open and very honest with himself in some moments, but played a persona towards the media to create this.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, please go ahead.
It's right what you said. In very rare moments, he was very honest. Interesting wise with these puppets, and in another interview with the Man magazine Penthouse, you know Penthouse, all these nude girls, and so he made an interview with that. In this interview, he was very proud of his war experiences. He was talking about, and a very brief remark on that, when he went to the academy with his wrong papers. The papers went wrong. So, but in these papers, he said he got the Iron Cross. And he was very proud of getting the Iron Cross. He never got the Iron Cross, by the way. So, but he said so. You know, why if he would have the Iron Cross, he should have killed many people by getting the Iron Cross. So that's by that. The point with him, and to answer your question, is that Beuys started in the late 50s to create his own mythos himself. And when he wrote his first CV for his first exhibition, then he said, I don't want to have this biography so correct in a correct way. I want to have it quite open and in a more creative way, to say so. And with that he started, and Lebenslauf werklos was after that, was then also this fictive thing. And I'm coming to an end. The point was then in the late 60s, he gave his first interviews. And in his first big interview, Engelhardt was the journalist. Engelhardt came up and led Beuys to a point when Beuys started to tell about this Tataren legend, the Stuka legend. That was in this interview. What I want to say with it is many people around him, journalists, authors, art scientists, throw him always to a certain way because they want to see him that way. And then he took over this thing, saying, okay, this is cool for me, I can deal with it. So just to make a joke on that. So but it was mainly like this. and at least, and then I'm really finished, it was Caroline Tistel, his fiancée. Caroline then wrote it in core words as she was a journalist, and then she perfectionized these mythos for the Guggenheim Ausstellung in New York. And that was, he has many, let me say, ghostwriters to do so.
The way you tell it, it's almost the West German society that created Beuys to the artist it needed, or it was. Or I think we, I hear myself in many voices here. We have too many questions, and we have two more questions I wanted to say, and then we have to come to a closure. We are already over time. So the first one is Hanko, and then here in the audience.
Well, my name is Hanko Jurgens from the Duitsland Institute. I was curious to know if, in my point of view, he would be very comparable with Günter Grass, who was very important for the German cultural memory, for coming to terms to the past, on the basis of a false biography. And perhaps I would think it's nice or interesting to interpret him in many ways and to see also contextualize him not only in this National Socialist groups, but also within the Greens, where he was active as well. So to see many perspectives, to support the professor in the front.
Yeah, you're right.
You agree, you don't want to react, so then as a moderator I'm very happy. No, we proceed, that's fine. For you, the last question.
I wanted to put forward the reason why we are here is because the museums who made these fantastic exhibitions of Joseph Beuys in Germany and elsewhere didn't find the time or the interest to do what an excellent art historian and responsible director of any museum has to do, to put the artwork into the context of the time. Yeah. And I refer here to the excellent work from the end of the 60s in the Akademie der Künste in Berlin, who was in the forefront of practicing this. And so hopefully these meetings are no longer necessary if the younger generation of directors of Stedelijk Museum or Kunstmuseum are becoming to their senses. And this is important too for the continuation of their work, because they need different interest from different audiences.
So, how nice, bravo. That's almost the closing word. Does anybody want to react? Mr. Hartog, you are museum director. Was that then okay from you? Everybody agrees on this? You want to react? Yes.
No, but he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, and now you would go into the depth of, you just said we have to stop already, but one of the points is that most of the research into certain artists, and Joseph Beuys is one of them, is guided via image rights. That is, the very moment you start interpreting it in certain ways, you get problems when it comes to image rights. And so a lot of the work that has been done over the years, mostly critical work on Joseph Beuys, did not get as much audience as it would have had if such a situation, like you just said, would have existed. Because already in the 1980s, when it came to Beuys in America, a very lively discussion started on, well, what is this work actually about? And from there on, but what you then see is that just a very narrow perspective, very spiritually guided, that has the focus here.
Final words?
That's final words.
The point is, and that is a very important point, today, as a scientist, as an art scientist, it's not possible to work about Joseph Beuys in a critical way or skeptical way, because the Beuys...
You are doing that, aren't you? You are doing it.
You can't get a picture of Beuys. You can't use it. The Beuys heritage doesn't allow it.
So Beuys, for commercial reasons, actually,
you can ask any art scientist in Germany or elsewhere, because I get all these letters from them. It's not allowed, and that's also one of the reasons why I didn't make the book on Beuys' work, because it's not allowed to picture Beuys' work. Believe me, if you are in a critical position, no chance to get away from Eva. Believe me, I have the letters from Eva.
So if you want to read a good book about Beuys,
we have to make.
But it's an important
again
point.
The final word.
If you want to read a real good book about Beuys, look for a book without pictures.
Okay. Thank you so much. This is a very critical ending of an interesting evening, interesting afternoon. Thank you so much. I was addressed to close this evening at 6:30, so we're delaying already. I wanted to mention that the exhibition on friendship and collateral damage of Joseph Semah is traveling to Bremen, isn't it? In April. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
yes, yes.
a bit of Werbung, reclame should be. So it's
very good.
And currently in the Oost-Indisch Huis at the UvA.
That's what we're discussing.
Linda will close off tonight. Just stand up. So go ahead.
Thank you very much. That was really an interesting meeting. En wat we echt wilden doen vandaag, doe het even in Nederlands, is toch extra informatie toevoegen aan Beuys. Want de andere informatie is overal bekend, dus dat wil ik toch nog even zeggen. En de volgende meeting is inderdaad in Duitsland, waar we 4 interventies gaan doen rondom Beuys. En de volgende bijeenkomst, de 6e, is in Maarten Lutherkerk, waar we vooral in zullen gaan op de Christusimpuls van Beuys en Steiner, die 2 figuren. En dat is op 15 mei 3:30 in de Maarten Lutherkerk. Jullie zijn allemaal welkom. Wees daar, kom met je opmerkingen, want het is beslist geen gesloten gesprek. Het is open. Dat is ook dankzij de fantastische moderatorschap van jou. En ik waardeer het zeer dat je dat in zo'n korte tijd op deze manier hebt kunnen doen. Ik dank jou zeer. We hebben ook een klein presentje voor je, maar ik moet even weten waar dat ligt. Maar dat krijg je zo. Maar zeer bedankt dat jij dit hebt gedaan. Petra, jou wil ik ook heel erg bedanken, want jij hebt waanzinnig veel gedaan om dit voor te bereiden. En ik sluit het bij deze af en wees welkom bij de volgende activiteit. Dank u wel.